be disagreed to, and I give the call to the member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Member for Leichhardt, for sharing Kate's story. And it's Kate's story, like it is the story of the nephew and the son of the member for Whitlam, like it is the story of friends and families of mine and people in my community, that makes this such an important debate. My community wants the elimination of discrimination based on religion, and so do I. My community wants the elimination of discrimination based on sexuality, and so do I. My community wants the elimination of discrimination based on gender and gender identity, and so do I. Let's be frank, what we want is the elimination of discrimination in all of its forms. But this bill doesn't do that. It doesn't deal with discrimination based on religion in an appropriate way, which it was intended to do. It doesn't deal with the elimination of discrimination based on sexuality, and it certainly doesn't deal with the elimination of discrimination based on gender and gender identity. As the Leader of the Opposition said, when we come to these debates, what we should be looking for are shields, not swords. Like, I assume, every other member of this chamber, I have been flooded with emails and phone calls, social media messages, conversations face-to-face, people from my electorate talking to me about why they have a particular position on this piece of legislation, and being privileged to hear many of their stories. And like many other members of this chamber, I have people in my life who I love, who I work with, who volunteer on my campaign, who I see at the local coffee shop or the sports club, or when I go to a local production of a play or a musical, who are gay, who are lesbian, who are bisexual, who are transgender, who are non-binary, who are just trying to work out who they are and what their place is in the world. And I have promised to represent, to the best of my ability, everyone in my electorate. And many people say that's whether or not you voted for me, and that's right. But I also promised to represent in this chamber everyone in my electorate, even if your values are different to mine, your view on faith is different to mine, your sexuality, your gender, your race, your identity is different to mine, because everyone's being deserves to be respected. Everyone deserves the opportunity to lead their best life, and not to feel like being fulfilled in who they are also means being hated or despised or discriminated against. And sometimes coming into this chamber to try to represent everyone in your community is incredibly difficult, because sometimes the needs and the priorities of individuals and groups aren't the same as the needs and priorities of other individuals and groups in one's electorate. But again, as the Leader of the Opposition said, it's not a matter of pitting those needs and priorities of one group against another. It's a matter of trying to balance them. It's a matter of trying to look at the rights and the responsibilities that we say are fundamental and how they apply to one group, with the rights and the responsibilities that we say are fundamental and how they apply to another group. And one of the challenges we have in this parliament and in our federal politics is that we don't have a charter or a bill of rights and responsibilities in which to guide us when we do that balancing process. And so it is that we often come to debate issues like the issues before us, the right to be free of religious discrimination and to practice one's faith, with the right to be free from discrimination based on sexuality and gender and to be one's true self, without a framework in which to do so. It's why we need to have a charter or a Bill of Rights in this country, because we can't keep dealing with these issues in an ad hoc way, and we can't keep dealing with these issues in a political way. They shouldn't be political and they shouldn't be partisan. They should be part of a charter of rights within which we do our utmost to balance the needs of all of the people and all of the groups in our society. And I know there are people on both sides of the chamber that believe that that's what we're here to strive to do. And that is why it is fundamentally so disappointing for me as an individual and a representative of a community that has overwhelmingly told me they want LGBTIQ members of our community to be protected, to have to be standing here having this debate about such a deeply flawed bill, when it's been some 4 years since the Prime Minister said he wanted to introduce legislation to protect religious freedoms, and also that he would protect children while doing so. There's been 4 years to get this legislation to a position which, as the Leader of the Opposition said, would be one of unity, would be an uplifting moment for this parliament and for the country. 4 years. And yet, not even at the 11th hour, at the last minute, the legislation which has been flawed from the moment of the exposure draft is then amended, or sought to be amended, by the Prime Minister in a way which has led particularly to transgender children and their parents feeling like they're being used as a political weapon. And that is wrong. And that is a shame on the Prime Minister. And it's a shame on those who see this as something to do before an election to try to gain political votes. I am proud and pleased that Labor is moving amendments in the 4 key areas that have been identified by speakers before me to try to address those issues with this bill, to prohibit religious vilification. Most of us don't know what it's like to be vilified because of your religion. We need to put ourselves in other people's shoes and try to imagine what that must be like. To prohibit discrimination against children on the grounds of sexuality and gender identity. To make it clear that in-home aged care service providers cannot discriminate on the basis of religion in the provision of aged care services, and I add disability services, as the Leader of the Opposition did. And to make it clear that the statement of belief provisions does not remove or diminish any existing protections against discrimination. The older you get, the more you realise that life is hard. We face challenges, all of us, personal, private and public. And there is no doubt that the move from childhood to adolescence to becoming an adult is hard for everyone, but it is so much harder if your fundamental self challenges the traditional gender and sexuality norms. We should be making it easier, not harder, for everyone to go through that journey. I do not support this bill in its unamended form. On behalf of my community and everyone who has given me the privilege of contacting me to ask me to be their voice, I want to make it very clear that, in my personal view, the amendments that Labor are putting forward are essential. I support and believe in religious freedom, and no one should be discriminated against because of what they believe in, and no one should be discriminated against because of who they are. And most of us haven't had to experience what gay and bisexual and transgender and non-binary and people who just don't fit into a category have experienced. But we need to try to imagine what it's like for them and be part of an inclusive and supportive and frankly loving society. So I want to end my contribution by saying that I ask everyone in this chamber, no matter which political party you're from or if you're an independent, everyone in this chamber who believes in compassion, who believes in self-determination, who believes in the power of love, who believes in the right of every person to live their life fully, who believes in acceptance and inclusion, to not accept that we can support an unamended bill which allows for discrimination on the basis that it might be fixed in the future, but to support Labor's amendments and stand up for what you believe in, because you can support Labor's amendments and be true to yourself and your conscience. Thank you.
I thank the member for Dunkley for her contribution.